On who?
Cult.
Cult? Cult. Sure.
I didn't know how Christian is still around. I haven't heard of it for a while. I guess it's still around.
I wouldn't know.
They are.
The last time I was there, it was about maybe 20 years ago.
So as far as cult is concerned, what are your thoughts on what draws people into that? Are they missing something in their lives? Have they reached that point that you've spoken about, where they have everything, that's not enough?
Cults have always been around. The first one appeared in certain parts of Africa. Plato had a cult. Aristotle had a cult. If you read the Gospel of Mark very, very closely, you realize that Jesus speaks to his disciples in a certain way, but the public in a different way. There are a couple of ways you can look at just the word culture. Cult and your. Cult basically means a group. Your means light. And so in this sense, a culture it has a leader, what we call the Buddha. The cult becomes the Sangha, the community. And then there are the teachings, only for those who are members. You know, it's kind of like you have a husband or a boyfriend or a companion, but you also have your friends. With your companion, you do things that you don't do with your friends. There is a certain element of trust, faith, understanding that you just don't have with your friends. A cult also comes from cultivation, and cultivation can be physical. You know, you can you go into your house, it's a little messy, and you play with it until it's cleaned up. It could also be cultivating your emotions. It's something we talked about last night. There are some negative emotions you have had, and you've come to realize that maybe their time is up and you need to get rid of them. And so you kind of grab your emotional shovel, if there is such a thing, books, therapy, workshops, to kind of uproot certain things and bring about new nutrients. There are intellectual cultivation, where you've come to realize that there are certain parts of life you're ignorant about or don't know much about, and you kind of want to educate yourself on those things. And then there is a spiritual kind, which is the most difficult. I mean, they're all difficult. And I suppose it's something that has to be dug up. Now, in regards to people missing something, I think we're always missing something. One of the problems with privilege, see, if you go back some 50, 60,000 years ago, the Paleolithic tradition, what we generally call the Stone Age, you come out naked. There is no Safeway, there is no Costco, there are no shelters such as this. You don't have clothing, you look around and everything just looks violent and hostile. Animals are just going to devour you. You're not going to sit there and say, does life have a meaning? Is there a God? How should I be creative? What is authenticity? These questions are just ridiculous and stupid, because the only thing that really matters, preservation of life, that's the only thing that you need to be worried about. And that's what Charles Darwin had argued, that every organism, even if you have cancer, for example, if I have cancer, it's a living organism, and it will do what it can to continue its existence. It will desire to kill me, but itself wants to survive. That's how organisms function. Even if someone in this class, for example, is bored because they don't like this class, they're only here for the grade, and I begin to kind of harass them a little bit, well, they begin to defend themselves. It may not be for the right reasons, but nevertheless, it's an organism that says, I just want to be bored, and in my boredom, I want to play video games, so leave me alone. Okay? And so that's what the Paleolithic tradition was all about, survival of the fittest. No one really cared about how well you would think about life, but they would care about how well you would think about surviving life. Okay? So the moment you wake up in the morning, your brain space is occupied with one thing. How do I protect myself from being devoured by monkeys, by Godzillas, by reptiles? And when the sun sets, is there a place I can go and stay and be safe? Sometimes it's freezing and I need my flesh to be protected. So that's all you think about. And I don't think there is a need for a cult. What you do need, if you happen to be somewhat weak in your physical stature, is go to someone who is relatively strong and say, listen, I will do A, B, C, D, just let me stay in your shed. Okay? Now, domestication of animals begin to take place, agriculture begin to take place, and once you have domesticated animals and once you have created agriculture, you have understood how the seasons work, you have understood how to make water flow from point A to point B, and for the first time what you have is permanent settlement. Now prior to this point, what happens is you're always moving around. You're like a Don Juan. A Don Juan is someone who loves to fall in love, but does not want to be monogamous, does not know how to be in a committed long-term relationship, so always is moving around. And so the moment this particular fellow or a woman or a man feels that they're becoming a little too attached, and attachment means the other person has power over you because you have to sit and wait for the phone call and you don't really want to do that, you've never done that, so it frightens you. So you move away. So you don't create history with anything. So as long as you're a nomad, and this is usually what happens with people who've had severe traumas in life. They're emotional nomads. They're never stationary. They're always moving around because they don't want to love. It's not that they don't want to, they're scared. Because they've been attached, they've been betrayed, and the life lesson for them is go into relationships, do not be emotionally attached. Okay? And so once you have the nomads, people who don't have permanent settlement, they can't be nationalist. There is no ground to worship. There is no settlement. You go from point A to point B. It's kind of like the Eskimos or the Inuits. What you have in the Inuits is, first of all, the mother, for example, nurses her child for about up to 6 years sometimes. Now, they have to move because first, food is not plentiful, and climate doesn't allow you to be stationary. You always have to move because it gets freezing cold and you'll just die. And so what they'll do is just they pack their stuff and they begin to move. Now, if you have 4 kids and they all need to be nursed, so what you do is you kind of look at the 4 kids you have and you say, well, the youngest one over there, I'm just going to leave him in the snow to die. If your parents can't walk this journey, you just leave them in snow to die. There is no shame, there is no guilt, there is nothing to repent about. That's their culture. And so they know that it is my mom, it's true, but well, my mom is part of life and she can't walk, I can't carry her, my husband can't carry her, my kids can't carry her, so I'm just going to give it to the land. Finished. The moment you have permanent settlement, what you have is you don't think about food as much. You don't think about shelter as much. Now you have a different kind of things to worry about. And that is the first time you have privilege. Sure, you have social injustice, political injustice, but what happens now is, now that you have a good amount of time on your hand, and this is usually the problem of first world countries, America, England, people who are just technologically advanced. When your belly is full and you've paid your rent, so there's a roof over your head, and you're not really too worried about various aspects of life, you sit back and you say, I'm really, really bored. And when you're bored, it means that everything you have in your life is not really nourishing you. It's not answering your yearnings or your longings. And that's one of the problems of, America. People are just bored silly. And so what happens is they begin to, like when you have a wound and you keep playing with it, and it gets bigger and bigger and then you start bleeding. So what happens is you're just bored. And that's one of the things that usually, and you need to be bored, but you have to be bored in the right way, and you have to make this journey from boredom to a different kind of desire in a different way. And we'll talk about that tonight as we approach the Epic of Gilgamesh. And so out of boredom, what happens, especially, for example, in this country in the 1960s, you have Hare Krishnas coming, you have Rajneesh coming, you have Krishnamurti coming, you have all these Buddhist philosophy all of a sudden appearing, Taoist philosophy appearing. And people just want a different meaning to their life. And that's one of the things about secular culture. You're all meat and no spirit. And you want a different meaning to your life. You want to identify with something that's not about your pocket, that's not about your house, that's not about your shelter, food, clothing, or your job. Kind of like the salmon fish. You say, I'm missing something, I just don't know what it is. And then the Messiah or the Saviors become cults and cultish figures. The Jim Jones and the David Koresh. And one of the things you need to understand about cult leaders is that there is something profoundly charismatic about them. You know, you're not going to follow someone who doesn't inspire you. I mean, it's very much like when you're attracted to someone. You're not going to be with someone that doesn't attract you in some shape or form. Whether they have money, whether they have a nice house, whether they're good looking, doesn't really matter. So a cult figure comes up with these wonderful ideas. And no doubt they've been inspired, you know. But whether or not they're a good mechanic of the soul or life, that's a different story. Now, it usually takes a long time to become a really, really good teacher. It also becomes a really, really long time to become a good student. Modern cults don't care about those things. They only care about the number of people who follow them. You know, and you're looking for people who are broken. If you want a really, really good student, what you need to do is find someone who is intact, who has food, who has shelter, who has clothing, who has a job, who has a companion. So the basic needs are met. And then you slowly break them. You slowly break them. You know, it's like a mechanic who says, oh, this car runs beautifully. Let me see what is taking place under the hood. Opens the hood and takes the engine apart. But because he's so good, puts it back together. Okay. Now, I can't do that. If I was to do that to my car, I'd be stranded. Good teachers break you. But they're also good mechanics. They put you back together, but they put you back together not in the way that you want, in the way that they see fit. Okay. Sometimes cults can be a stepping stone. Let's say, for example, I have a cult, I'm a cult leader, and you're inspired, and later on you come to realize, kind of like, you know, Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad. It's a cult. But there is something very special and unique about Malcolm X. He doesn't care about power, you know. He doesn't care about the stage. He's looking for something, which is very strange. I mean, first you're black, you know what poverty is, you know what your community is suffering from, you know, and you can take advantage of Elijah Muhammad to reach out to your community and better their lives. But that's not what he wants. He's a really, really good student and he wants to understand certain things, you know. There is this wonderful story that comes from the Middle East. It's called The Lost Key. And the story is about a man who has lost his key to the house. And he's just underground, unforced, trying to look for it, find it. And his friend comes forth and says, you know, what have you lost? My key to the house. Well, the friend, because he's a friend, he also gets on his fours and begins to look for it. And after 2, 3, 4, 5, 9, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 hours, looks at the man and says, you know, I'm trying to help you out, but do you remember where exactly you lost your key? And the friend says, well, I lost the key inside the house. And the friend says, if you lost the key inside the house, why the hell are you looking for it outside? And that's a good mark of a teacher. You know, usually teachers, and there's a process. You first become attracted to the teacher. Then, if your teacher is not proficient or has some flaws, what your teacher wants is to keep you attracted to him or her for a long, long, long time. A good teacher, on the other hand, who's very proficient and knows his stuff or her stuff really well, usually invites you to him. And for the most part, teachers have to be men. Women don't make good teachers, and I'm not talking about academic settings. Okay? On the spiritual, in the spiritual tradition, teachers need to be men. Now, it doesn't mean, why are you laughing? It's okay. I'm not going to explain why I'm saying that, but nevertheless. And so through a good amount of training, the teacher ultimately pushes you to look for answers within yourself, like the kingdom of God within you. But you need to have a good blender within. He needs to kind of cultivate and create these tools inside you, so that after a certain point, you look at your teacher and you say, he doesn't really have anything else to offer me. Now you go on this quest and you have a good amount of understanding. Your dependency is no longer on the teacher, but on yourself. Cults today don't do that. And they can do that. The reason why I asked you about the babysitting is, as we were going around, giving our names, you realize there is someone missing. And then you probably ask, well, why didn't he call on this chap? Because there comes a stage where you no longer want to babysit. So there are lots of things that you need to understand if you want to find yourself a really, really, really good cult. But people have longings and yearnings and they need to be satisfied. So they join places. And there's nothing wrong with that.
They are looked at negatively.
Yeah. Their money, their soul, their bodies, everything. Sure, yeah. And there is nothing wrong with that, by the way. There is nothing wrong with it because of the following. See, when you're in love with someone, you're more than willing to sacrifice, whatever it is. You write poetry. It's only when the emotions go away, then you begin to reflect. Because we are tax collectors in many ways, all of us are. That I'm going to give you my love, but I want something in return. Okay? And so what happens is you give and you give and you give and you expect things, but your expectations are not met. And then you say, well, I gave you this and I gave you that and I didn't get anything back. Okay. So what you do in a cult is some guy is talking or some gal, you love what they're saying and you love the way you feel when you're there. So you give him your money. Then you give him your body. Then you give him this, then you give him that. You give him everything that you have. Kind of like Abraham. God says, give me your son. Fine, I'll give you my son. Okay? But there comes a point where Abraham is not perhaps as emotional, and he thinks back and he says, why would God ask me for such a thing? That's not a just God. That's not a compassionate God. That's an unjust entity. So what you have is, while you have this intense emotion, we do things. And when you have intense emotions, there is no self to you. All you know is to give. You become enormously generous. There are moments that your needs are not met, and then you begin to kind of say, well, why is he asking for this? And why is he asking for that? Maybe I should be a bit more cautious. So you're talking about two different states, and when you mix them together, you run into a lot of difficulties. There is a story that comes from one of these esoteric or perhaps mystery Christian tradition. It's about Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And no one really knows if Mary Magdalene actually existed, but nevertheless, as stories go, it's a really, really, really nice story. It's a little kinky, but nevertheless. So Mary goes to Jesus and says, I want to follow you. What do I need to do? And Jesus says, this is what you must do. He pulls his pants down and he begins to masturbate. It's in the books, not the books that you've read, but nevertheless, it's in the books out there. And it goes back to the 3rd century. And he has an orgasm and he puts it in his mouth and he swallows it. And he says, this is what you must do. And at that point, Mary just loses consciousness. She faints. It's just too much for her. And we have this idea that teachers need to be a certain way and they can't be another way. And so what happens is, and there is something really flawed about us, which is we are looking for perfection. And in a cult setting, your teacher is the embodiment of perfection. And he or she is going to kind of project this perfection all the time. Just in case he slips or she slips, that image is going to be tarnished for you. And then the emotion that you need to keep this relationship as intimate, as intense, begins to dissipate. And then you begin to lose interest. And then you go away. And the truth is, what needs to happen, you need to respect the fact that teachers have inspired moments where they're not really themselves. And then something about them shuts down and they become a regular human being with regular needs and desires. And the flaws of just being human. You know, it's kind of like there are moments you sit and you write poetry. You don't know how it comes about. You're just inspired, and poetry just oozes out of you. And then you say, "Oh, I'm just so tired," and you just go to wash dishes, and you say, "Okay, after 10 minutes, I'll go back and finish the poem." And you wash the dishes, you go back to finish the poem, but the inspiration is gone. We're talking about two different entities, inspired, okay. And when you're inspired, it takes so much energy out of you physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, if you believe in those things, okay? And then your body shuts down and says, that's enough. Just go and walk around and then come back. But when you come back, you have no idea if the inspiration is going to be there. You are really at its mercy. Yeah.
So you said that you think cults, not giving your mind, your body, your to cults is there's nothing wrong with that, right? You said
when you're doing it, there is nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. Okay.
But then when you begin to think about it, and remember, you begin to think about it because now there's a gap or a space between you and the space in which you are, or the cult. It's something that happens in relationships all the time.
Some cults take it to the extreme. Yeah.
That's okay too. That's fine. Yeah.
Men who have multiple wives.
You mean the Mormons? I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
And they marry girls as young as
Sure.
10 and 11 years old.
Okay.
Well, they would deem this.
Yes.
Because they're in this cult, this religious organization. Okay.
Are there flaws? Absolutely. Do people take advantage of others? Definitely. I think the only thing that I could say or would say is just keep your eyes open and be careful. Look, it's like any other relationship. At your age, should you desire to go out on a date, you're going to ask questions you wouldn't ask when you were 18. You're much more careful. You're much more cautious. You understand the value of money, stability. You understand that this guy needs to have a job, or at least he needs to have health care. These are things you understand now. And the cult is just another relationship you walk into. Look at the students or the disciples. Look at the teacher and what he or she is saying. And then, if you have some maturity to you, if you're seasoned, you ask the right questions. You look at things the right way. You make your observations. And you either stay or you go. One of the best books, for those of you who are interested in such nonsense, one of the best books that you will ever read that has to do with a teacher-student relationship is Daughter of Fire. It's about 1,000 pages. It has to do with a young woman of 50 being bored, wanting to experience something different, and her friend tells her that there's a guy in India, you should just go and have a good time with him. And she gives him everything. The other thing that I think it's important to say is that you don't have the student-teacher narrative in the Western world. It doesn't exist. In America, what you have are narratives about cults that usually teachers take a great amount of advantage from their students. It's true. It's always been that way. Ever since cults have been around, it's always been that way. Okay. And as long as you don't have that narrative, there's a good chance that you're going to fall into these traps. You should read the book. It's a good book.
So would you say that, is that why you do people from the US go on these retreats? We get like that.
Yeah, and they come back, write a book, eat, pray, and love, or love, pray, and eat, and then throw up. Yeah, it's, you have ridiculous people with ridiculous lives, ridiculous expectations, go to India with little to no understanding, find someone, are inspired, and come back and they write a book. Again, I go back to what I said. If you are seasoned in relationships, you know how to ask good questions, you know how to pay attention and be aware of certain things that your date is doing. And then you make your decisions based on past experiences. The other thing that I suppose you should also be aware is that I think on the spiritual quest, if there is such a thing, the sort of things you do are not rational. They don't make sense. And if you were to examine them, you'd probably walk away. But you do them because you don't think. And you can think. And it's not permissible to think. It's like your 12-year-old son comes to you and says, Dad, I'm in love. A 12-year-old doesn't have the experience of the proper tools to know anything about love or relationships. Nothing. But nevertheless, he will write poetry. He will sit in his room and wait for the call. And when his heart is broken, he will cry, he will weep, he will read the Bible. But that doesn't mean anything. Yeah.
Why that doesn't mean it. I know, I can understand what you're saying, like the other version of what it is and the 30-year-old version. But why does it not mean anything?
What do you
Why
mean?
does it like this 12-year-old, this theoretical 12-year-old is like, I guess, anguish or whatever, heartbreak?
As experiences go, it's a great thing to experience. There's nothing wrong with experiencing things. But the sort of narratives that you inject in a love narrative as a 12-year-old are just ridiculous.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but
You're just saying that the experience itself has value?
I'm saying that like why would a child's experience, I'm just thinking about like a child's experience. Like I'm sure we've all had experiences with our children that we look back on and we think are so silly.
Yeah.
Because of our
Sure.
perspective now. But what I'm trying to say is this is coming from like my own perspective. I still think that a child having whatever experience they're going to have, whatever emotional roller coaster they're going to have, is still a valid part of their experience. And it just has just as much validity as someone who's much older, their experience in opera, even though it's a very different emotional arc and a very different lesson that they're learning.
As a parent, I don't care what my child wants to experience. I want to make sure that what they experience is going to benefit them. I don't want to see sadness in my child. I don't want to see confusion. I don't want to see anger. I don't want to see depression. Now, is them falling in love valuable? Probably. Is it still valuable for them to be depressed? As a parent, no. And I will do what I can to make sure they don't experience that.
I wasn't trying to say value. I was just trying to say, you said it didn't mean it. And I was just wondering why.
As someone who is 60, it doesn't mean anything to me. It's kind of like your essay. It doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't mean that... I'm sorry?
Why does it mean something more than old?
It's like a novice chef versus a really, really seasoned chef. I'm sure that if you met a novice chef or a bake who would make you chocolate chip cookies, you would love it. If on the other hand it was Mrs. Fields, you would love it even more. And if it was me, I would rather have the chocolate chip made by Mrs. Fields than my 12-year-old.
But what if they told me it was a kid? They like made it.
Yeah, I will pretend that I like it. As I pretend that I enjoy your questions and I pretend that I like your essays. I will pretend. And there is nothing wrong with that, because if you want to survive in the social world, most of it is pretending. It's like any other relationship. You're not going to love your companion all the time, but you pretend. That's how things move on. Ultimately, human life is about value. How old are you? 20.
I just read the things.
One of the things about regret is that whenever you are regretful of something that you have done, it may be that while you were doing it, it was fun and it had value and inspired you, made you a poet and an artist. But when time passes and when you reflect and you kind of suffer a little bit because of the pain and the hurt and all that, you ask why. Why did I have to do it? Why was I so stupid? I mean, it's something that all of us say. You know, experiences are wonderful to have. You know, but we are future-oriented animals. You know, maybe you're the sort of a person that you have your stable job, you have inherited tons of money, you're just taking classes for the heck of it. You don't care about the instructors, you don't really care, you just don't want to be home, you just take classes for the heck of it. Maybe that's what you do, just not to suffer boredom, you know. If on the other hand, you're a little dissatisfied about your job or perhaps the pay, you know, you say, well, maybe I should go to school and take a class so I could graduate and my salary will go up and I can maybe change my job. That's what all of us do. We are always looking towards the future. See, you have your past, okay, with all the traumas, all the pain, all the pleasures, all that stuff. Then you have the future. And most of us do not want to repeat the past, unless you happen to be like Roger Federer or Tiger Woods, that you won a Masters and you can continue to win these tournaments. What usually happens for us is you take advantage of the present moment to build your mansion that exists in the future. Right now in your head is, I want to get my bachelor's degree. So you use the moment, this present moment, to be in this class, and once in a while be inspired to ask your questions. But you're here for one reason, because you see an image of yourself 2 years from now, and that is what you're working on. It is only like the Buddha or Jesus Christ who can say, you know what, I am completely satisfied, I'm just going to sit my ass and breathe in and out. That's a stupid life. And no one lives like that. Not even them. Because if they were so satisfied, they wouldn't be going around giving sermons to people. They wanted to make sure that their image lives inside the other people. We're always planning for our future. Always. Which means that there is dissatisfaction about life, the life that you have right now. That's just the way things are. All parents do what they can to build a better future for their kids. And kids by default are just dumb. Kids are dumb. Dumb. D-U-M-M. Yeah.
I think that I can kind of agree with what she's saying because of this, because I think that kids are, yes, dumb, but at the same time, I think that while there may be more maturity and understanding in a 50-year-old's perspective of love than the 17-year-old's perspective of love, which is where I am now, I acknowledge that my thoughts on love are probably dumb, and by the time I'm 50, I'm probably going to be like, wow, that was stupid.
Absolutely,
but at the same time, that doesn't mean that there's no value in that experience, because when an 80-year-old's looking back when they're 50, they're probably going to be like, wow, that's kind of dumb.
Yeah, there is no value in that experience.
So there's value.
No.
there's value in like
My recommendation would be go to women who fell in love at the age of 17 and got married and have kids, and they came to realize that the man they're with is a complete loser, and see how much they value that experience. Yeah. Yeah, in the back, and then in the front, and then in the middle.
I said that theoretical
What? I didn't. I never said that. Jesus Christ! Why do you? You guys take the stuff to? Yes, I never said it's okay.
Okay, because yeah, it sounded like you were saying it's like morally okay.
I didn't hear that.
No,
But
What specifically did you hear that made you think that?
like cults are okay,
Yeah, but
and
you
that the cult that was probably wrong.
First of all, if you read the Old Testament, someone like David, he had like 300 wives and 600 concubines. Today, of course, that's a big no-no. But in his day, if you were living in the ancient Greeks, for example, right? If you're like Socrates, you need to have a wife, you need to have children, but you also need to have a boyfriend. You can't judge the past by what you have now. It's not fair. You know, if you're 50 and you go back to the thing you suffered at the age of 20, it wouldn't be a fair thing that you do to yourself. You're a 50-year-old woman now. You're in a different place in life. You don't need to go back and judge yourself and punish yourself relentlessly and constantly because of something you did 30 years ago. And the point I'm trying to make, David did that some 3,000 years ago. 3,000 years ago, life was different. Dustin Hoffman and Robert De Niro were on the stage. And, you know, this Me Too movement and all that stuff that was taking place a couple of years ago, and I guess to some extent it still is, they were asked some questions, especially Dustin Hoffman, because he was accused of a few things. And he said, listen, the 1960s and 70s, there were different eras. People were just different. They did different things. And it was okay. Now, you're judging the past by all the information, all the tools, and all the perspectives you have today, and it's not fair. Was slavery okay some 300 years ago? Yeah. Is it okay now?
way?
No.
But in what way was it okay? I mean, it might have been okay to the people who were, you know.
Do people suffer? Do you like this class? No. If you like this class, you wouldn't be reading a book. Do you like this class? The answer is no. Are you here? Yes. None of us like most of the places we occupy. That's just the way things are. But we had a certain culture that made it somewhat okay. Today, that's not okay. That's all I'm saying.
Society is like
Society creates, society redefines, and in redefinition, it destroys. We are a victim to society and to time. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that you can say that in the 1960s or 70s that was how it was done, but it's how it was done by a certain group of people with a certain group of morals. That doesn't mean morals are not universalist. And when you look at your example of slavery, if you look historically, it wasn't generally accepted. People had to manufacture consent, and then it became the morally acceptable thing in the United States among white Americans. But it generally, like, there's European people, like, in Europe who were like, that's not okay, and they had to create eugenics, so false race science, to make it seem like it's okay. That doesn't mean it was okay, and that doesn't mean the people on the receiving end were okay with it, same in the 1960s or 70s. That doesn't make it okay. Even if someone at the time thought it was okay, the person who's a victim of that behavior still has the same emotions as they may have now.
How can you say it's all false? Are you a scientist?
It's not, what do you mean all false?
Okay, let's move on. Any other questions or comments before we?
I'm curious, like, do people follow religion because, you know, like, why do we value things outside of ourselves? Or why do we live in nature? Why do we follow cults or certain leaders? You know, why do we value things outside of ourselves?
There was a study that was done with the elephants some time ago. That there were 5 or 6 elephants, and they were each given a bucket, clear plastic water, except one. And in that one that was different, it was pink water. It was just water, but just pink. And something really strange happened to the elephants. The elephant who was drinking pink water was all of a sudden deemed very unique and very special. They stopped drinking water, all these other 4 or 5 elephants, and they gathered around the elephant who was drinking from the pink bucket. And they wouldn't touch that bucket, they would just watch this elephant drink water. There is something about us, that recognizes, for some strange reason, charisma and magnetism. Now, you may not like it, but nevertheless, there is something about us that gravitates towards it. I don't know what it is about Brad Pitt. Maybe it's his eyes, maybe it's his hair, maybe it's just a collection of various units coming together. When I watch him on the stage to talk, I just sit and like to listen to what he says. Or there is an Indian actor by the name of Shah Rukh Khan. Just the way he is and just the way he speaks, so eloquently, philosophically. He's an actor. He sells dreams. But there is something about him that just glues me. It's something that Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, had talked about some 2,000 years ago. On the side of the road, as you're driving home, you see a car flipped. And a guy is on like fire. It's a gruesome image. And yet you sit back and watch it. And Aristotle would argue that there is something about us that we enjoy looking at violence and gruesome images. Why, we don't really know. So, if your question is, why is it that we gravitate towards my father? He doesn't speak English well. And I remember him watching, how are you? He was watching the Malcolm X movie, Denzel Washington, and near the end when he got shot, now, does he know black history? No. Does he have any black friends? No. Does he speak English? No. Does he even know who Malcolm X is? No. But he likes politics. He likes the concept of justice and all that because that's what Persians do and are like. And so at the end when he saw Malcolm being shot, he just cried. And this is like a 70-year-old man who is not American, he's not black American, he doesn't know anything about America or his culture, and yet he just sat and wept. There is something about him that gravitates towards justice and weeps when he sees and experiences and feels injustice. And it's something, again, that Plato will talk about. I'm not a musician, but something about you recognizes when someone hits the wrong key. Now, how is that possible? You don't play the piano, you've never heard the piano, and yet you recognize something about you says, oh, that's the wrong key. It doesn't smell right. So there is, again, something about us that enjoys, I think another way you can look at this is cut yourself into 5 different parts. There is the physical part to you, there is the emotional part to you, there is the psychological part to you, there is the intellectual part to you, and then there is the spiritual part to you. Okay. Now, this physical part is something about you gravitates towards, let me put this on the board. So there is Wolf, and there is Amir, okay? Now, on the physical level, let's just say, you look at me and you say, okay, a nice looking man, I like him. That's the physical part. And then you say, Amir, how are you doing? Now I need to talk. Hi. Now your ears, hear something, and this part is attractive. My voice is unattractive. And something about you says, okay, I like him on a physical level, but when he talks, the sort of emotions that come out of me, I hate them. And then you got to figure out, do you want to stick around? Do you want to leave? But let's say my voice is also attractive. But you happen to be an intellectual. You like to have nice, meaningful, deep conversations. Okay? And so you ask me, so what do you do for fun? So, well, I play video games and I watch porn. And though you're attracted to me on a physical level, you're also attracted to the tone of my voice. What I do, okay, disappoints you. And then you say, okay, I'm attracted to this, but this is not working out for me. Now, if you have watched this new image of Jesus that came about some 4 or 5 years ago by anthropologists and sociologists, for those of you who go home today, you can kind of just Google the new image of Jesus. He is a truly unattractive human being. You know, they got together, these scientists, and said, okay, this is Palestine, the Middle East, there is the sun, this is how people look, and there's a good chance that he is not a white guy with blonde hair and blue eye. Now, if that image is accurate, you need to ask yourself a very, very interesting question, which is, human beings are instinctually attracted to things that are beautiful. Why, how, when, who the hell cares? All I know is that when I see something beautiful, I walk towards it. How is it that someone can look at Jesus and you're about to throw up because he's so ugly, and yet the moment he opens his mouth, intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, you say, I don't really care how ugly this man is. There is something about him that pushes me to see him, but not his physical body. That's the sort of animals that we are. And there isn't much you can do about that. Pavarotti, I think he's dead now. He was married for about 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And there was this young 30-year-old, and by this time he was like 70 or 60 some. This young woman of 27, 28 was working for a company, and his boss one day comes to her and says, we have some guests, can you take him to, his concert? And she didn't like opera at all. And so she doesn't want to lose her job, she takes him. And they go into the backstage, he signed some of the images, and then her and Pavarotti begin to talk a little. And all of a sudden, she's like 27, he's like 60 or 70, and he's been married, he's got kids. There is something about this man that becomes very attracted to this young woman. She wants to go home, but something about her says, stay, talk with him some more. And they begin to kind of what we call in Greek ludos. It's a love affair, but in flirtatiousness. They begin to flirt. And he gives her his number, she gives him her number, and then they begin to kind of contact one another once in a while. And then there comes a point where she looks at him and says, I love you. And he looks at her and says, I love you too. He leaves his wife and marries her. How is it a 27-year-old, a very attractive woman can fall in love with such an unattractive old man who's about to die? That's just sort of animals we are. David Koresh was intellectually very, very, very attractive. Very attractive. There is a school in Grass Valley right now. I'm not quite sure what it's called. But supposedly they're the students of the followers of G.I. Gurdjieff, the Armenian philosopher. The guy messes around with kids. But people still like him. Why, despite knowing all of this? That's just the way things are. One of the corruptest of organizations has been the Catholic Church. People so gravitate. There is something inspiring about the message of the church, and there is nothing wrong with it. You got to accept the bad with the good. That's just the way things are. Anyone else before we go ahead? No. Yes, Jack.
Well, I'm not a Christian or a Catholic or anything like that, but I do know that the Catholic Church has a lot of problems with people traded, right? And a lot of people think that it is kind of a holy way, right?
Okay.
But you say there's nothing wrong with that.
There is nothing wrong with the church as there is nothing wrong with Trump. People are just the way they are. People by nature are not reflective. People by nature do not like to be disturbed. We don't like to be bothered. Truth is a bit too much for us. It's something that Nietzsche had argued. We don't kill Jesus because he was a good man. We kill Jesus because he made us look bad. Why do you read a book in this class? What, listening to me is boring? And that's what you do. You distract yourself. You want to be honest? Pack your stuff and leave. There you go. Anyone else? Yeah. Sure.
Religion is really big business.
It's a big business? Okay.
I mean, they make a lot of money.
Sure. Well, religion is expensive. It's like, there's Laney College. Every single person in this room gives to the district about $4,000. It's not about your education. It's about whether or not they can get enough people enrolling in classes so that the district can get money to pay faculty, administrators, maybe once in a while clean the campus. Everything is a business. I mean, you and I are old enough to know that when you get into relationships, it's a business, and it's a very tricky business, and involves a lot of politics. Love takes a back seat. It's all about politics after a while. Yeah.
So I guess what, since like Jesus and Buddha, they came from privileged families, and then something awakened them that they wanted to follow a different path.
Mm-hmm.
What was the thing that they were attracted to?
So, instead of talking about Maslow, as we did last night, I'll put it to you in this way. So, this is the stage where usually we occupy. It's called the iron stage. And symbolically, it refers to the genitalia. Okay? Now, it's all about physical pleasures. And they need to be immediate, they need to be quick. They need to be instant. I had a friend or a student, unfortunately for this guy, he was addicted to porn from a very, very young age. Then he transferred to San Francisco State. One day he comes to me and he says, I met this young woman. I really like her and I want to have a relationship with her, a meaningful one. But porn gets in the way. I can't see her as a human being and I can't experience her as a human being. I just want her and then I want to toss her away. So this is the iron stage and there is nothing wrong with it. As long as you're able to graduate from all the things that this particular space provides for you. Okay? This is about sex, it's about food, it's about drugs. You just want to have fun. And it's your right to have fun. The only problem is, at a certain stage, you just need to grow up a little bit. I mean, if you're like a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old or 30-year-old in this class, you should have the maturity to put away your cell phones, your laptops, your desktops, and just sit and listen. You're bored? So what? That's what life is. Okay? So, and remember, this is what mostly America is all about. Pleasures that come to you very, very, very quickly. Especially with the advent of technology, cell phones and texting and all that. Okay? Now, this occupies a good amount of your time. And any one of us in this class who have kids, you know that to be true. They want to watch movies, they want to have fun with their friends. That's just, they just want to have fun. Okay? There comes a point, whether it's because of social factors, whether of parental factors, whether psychologically you're just mature enough, you graduate to a place called bronze. And bronze has to do with the abdomen. It's a place of power. Not power to have fun, but power in the sense that you see yourself differently now. You don't want to sit with your friends and smoke and drink and just be stupid. You want to take classes. And you want to take classes because you want a better job. You want a better paycheck. You want to move to a house. Okay? Now, the only way you can graduate to the bronze stage is something about you all of a sudden wakes up and says, I'm just done. You know, sex is good, but I want a little meaning to it. I want intimacy. I want conversation. There was this episode on Friends where Chandler and, I don't know, someone else, Rachel. Chandler and Janine, sure. And Phoebe. Phoebe has met this guy, he's a police officer, and they have sex everywhere all the time. And Chandler goes to use the restroom, his girlfriend follows him and says, Monica, that's right. Monica says, I want to do what they do. Can we just do it right now? And Chandler says, you're in the men's bathroom, get out. He says, yeah, let's just use that stall. He says, listen, I like where we are now. Having sex once every 5 years is good. We go out to places, we have food together, we have conversations. And what basically is happening is there's a stage in your dating where sex is at the very center of the relationship. There comes a point where you graduate. This particular graduation, on the other hand, needs to be more psychological, because it is psychological. There comes a point where you look at your drunk friends and say, I don't want to hang out with these losers anymore. You know, I'm 35, I'm in a different place in life, smoking and drinking and watching movies all the time is no longer doing it for me. So you sign up for a few classes. You have a different image of yourself. Okay. Now, if, for example, a pleasure, now something about desires that you should know. You see something out there, attraction comes about. It's like a seed, okay? The moment attraction comes about, there is this poverty that begins to take place inside you. Because anything you're attracted to, you say, I want it to be satisfied. If you're, for example, having a Zachary's pizza, deep dish, spinach, mushroom, and pesto, okay, I look and say, I really want what she has. Now, if I keep playing with this seed of attraction, desire comes about. It's a bit more intense. Okay? Now remember, the more intense it becomes, the more poor you will begin to feel. Zachary's pizza begins to occupy more space inside you. Then you say, oh, you know, I want Zachary's pizza. Now there is nothing wrong with wanting. All of us want the best of everything under the sun. The moment this seed of want blossoms, it becomes a need. Now when it becomes a need, there is something about need that didn't exist here. You have strong and intense emotions. You can't sleep, You can't eat. All you're thinking about is the object of attraction. Now, in order to satisfy your need, you need resources. If you want a Tesla and you say, I need a Tesla, well, it's going to cost you about $50,000. That means, well, you can't go out and hang out with your friends. You need to save money. Okay? Now, I say this for the following reason. If, for example, you need sex, this can be satisfied in about 10 minutes. You can either have a companion or you can turn on your laptop. 10 minutes. That's the amount of patience that you need to exercise. If, on the other hand, you realize that it's getting to the place of need, okay, and you don't want to create the need, you have to manipulate and destroy the seed that's about to happen. If you have any mindfulness and awareness about you, you slowly pick up your phone and call your mom. And all of a sudden, the idea of sex goes away and the sickness of your mother comes about. But you have to be very cunning, very mindful and aware, because that's the only thing you can do. You have to be able to manipulate your psyche. Okay? And when you get to the spiritual quest, you can't do this on your own. Your teacher has to do it for you. Now, remember, most of the things that you want in the iron stage, you can satisfy them in 10 minutes. Then when you graduate to bronze and you say, I want to go to school, the problem with school is that you're not going to satisfy the need or the desire for a degree in 10 minutes. For a bachelor's degree, it's going to take about 3 years if you're lucky. If you have any addictions down here, they're going to come up and sabotage all the desires you have up here. You want to stay in school, okay? But you realize that down here you've been involved in pleasure-seeking mode, 10-minute satisfaction. For the past 20 years that you say, I got to wait 3 years to finish school? That's way, way, way too long. And so while you're going to school, you also smoke to numb yourself a little bit. Okay. Now, there comes a point, let's just say you have graduated, you've exercised patience for about 3 years, then you go out there and you find yourself a job. Now, if any power you had down here, and power I mean money, you would spend it on sex, food, and drugs. Up here, you save your money, which is very difficult to do. You save your money because you want a car and you want a house. Or maybe you don't want a car or a house for yourself, you want to buy a car and a house for your parents. Your relationship to money changes, your relationship to time changes, to yourself changes, and to other people change. Okay? But these two areas, the iron and the bronze, have to do just with you. Wolf. You go home and you're all alone. There comes a point where you say, you know what? I went to school, I have a master's or a bachelor's or this or that, I have enough money, I have a house, I have a car. I want a companion. And you do something that you've never done before. Now, in relationships, if you want it to survive, you are required to make a lot of sacrifices. There are things you desire, but your companion doesn't. You know, it's like when you go out with someone, you say, you want to go to In-N-Out? No, I want pizza. Okay, let's have pizza. For the first time, you have to learn how to overcome yourself so that the other person can like you. And this is what they call the Silver Age, or stage. Intense emotions and intimate relationships. It's something you don't have here, and it's something you don't have here. And the tools you've acquired from this area and this area, for the most part, are not going to be useful up here. Lots of conflict in relationships. And you have to find a way to resolve them. Now, if you don't have good role models down here, there's a good chance that when you get to relationships, they're going to fail. Now, let's just say you have intense relationships here. They're intimate and they are healthy. Okay? You've had the pleasure of your physical body. You've had the pleasure of living in a house, having money, having physical security. You've also had the privilege of being in good relationships. You loved your parents as they loved you. You loved your husband and your wife as they loved you. And then you look at all of this stuff and you say, it's not enough. Very much like the salmon fish, you are condemned. And all of us are. The Epic of Gilgamesh is about, I don't know, maybe 7,000 years? 7,000 years old. It's about a guy who lived somewhere in Iraq. He was a king, a prince. He had everything. He had sex, he had drugs, he had power, he had great relationships. This wasn't enough. And one of the reasons why I think this story is really, really good, for those of us in this class who once in a while, now one of the things that before continuing, what happens when you have all of this stuff is that there comes a point, and this is how desires usually work. So you're attracted, you desire, you want, you need, you're satisfied. Now, this is a journey that you take, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes 10 years. When you are satisfied, boredom sets in. The moment boredom sets in, what you have accomplished no longer has any value for you. Which is really, really awful. You spent 10 years going to school, getting all these degrees, now you have them, and you walk home and you say, I don't really feel anything about the degrees anymore. You long to be in a relationship, you are in one, it's good, but it has lost its value now. And that's the human condition. All the stuff lives in time, and time has a tendency of removing the glossiness of things, the vibrancy of things. Okay? Now, the problem with boredom is that it becomes frustrating. Okay? And then you want to go back and inject value in this, like you look at your wife or your husband and you say, let's go on a trip. We can reinvent ourselves in this relationship. And what you're basically saying, being in Oakland, being in this house and watching movies is no longer doing it for me. If this continues, I'll probably leave you. Can we just go out there and just do something fun? And in essence, what you're saying is, what used to work no longer works. And it's frustrating. And you go on this trip, and you try to make this relationship go, it's not working. And then it makes you angry. And in frustration and anger, because what happens now, there's a crack in the software or a virus, you think back and reflect, why did I get into this business in the first place? Okay. There is nothing you can do about this. This is going to happen from the moment you're born to the last breath you take before you die. Because everything lives in the hand of time. And time has a tendency of just removing life from it. And in the end, you get frustration, disappointment, and anger and regret. That's just the way things are. Now, when you had all of this, what happens is you get really, really, really bored. There was a French philosopher, Jean-Paul Sartre. He said that if you want to know the evil that lives in human life, it is boredom, and it's very patient. You know, it's just going to sit by the door, sometimes for years. And eventually you're going to open the door and boredom is going to come in and say, I'm here. Everything that you touch eventually will get boring, frustrating. Now, when you get bored in a state of privilege, what you do is somehow you want to overcome boredom. Maybe you'll go back here and you smoke. Maybe you'll drink. Maybe you'll have sex. Because these are the tools available to you. You don't have any other tools. Maybe you'll go back and you say, you know what, maybe I should go to the bookstore and buy a book and read a book. Maybe I should go to school and get another degree. Maybe I should change my job. Maybe I should buy a different car. Okay? Or maybe you go here. Maybe we should have kids now. So there is enough stuff down here to keep you busy for a long, 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 long time. For some of us, something devastating happens. Since you're talking about the Buddha and Gilgamesh and Jesus and Moses and Muhammad, all those people, nothing here works. If you've seen the movie The Matrix, Thomas Anderson works for a company called Meta Cortex. That there is this culture, this society, this factory behind the human brain, and is guiding us, all of us. And fear is the dominant force that drives human life. The problem with Thomas Anderson is he lives in room 101. You know, without getting too complicated, it's just a place of conflict. I love life, I hate life. I love life because it can give me pleasure. I hate life because pleasure eventually turns into boredom. I love life because it makes me engaged. At the same time, it's disappointing. Now, for someone like the Buddha, what usually happens is the following. And I'm guessing, I'm not him. I just read a few crummy books. I'm thinking that به کشت خاطرم جز غم نرویه، به باغم جز گل ماتم نرویه، به صحرای دل بی حاصل ما گیاه ناامیدی هم نرویه. If this is a little complicated, think of it this way. You've spent 5, 10, 15, 20 years with a companion. Everything is good. But you're slowly feeling boredom setting in. And you say, well, you know, maybe we can go out to dinner, maybe we can do this, maybe we can do that. And because boredom means you sit, you look at him or her, but there is no conversation. In fact, you want your own space. And inasmuch something from the inside tells you you're destroying the relationship, you go back into the kitchen to talk, but you realize there is nothing to say, so you retreat. And then comes this moment, which is there is no space in the house you can go where misery doesn't follow you. You just don't want to be there. And that is when you enter your desert life. In the desert, there is no nourishment. The relationship cannot offer you anything anymore. I mean, there is a wisdom to getting to know someone, and 3 months later you marry them. Because the more you spend time with them, the less you'll be interested in them. The more you are in life, the less eventually you'll be interested in it. Now, in the desert life, and that's the journey that all of these heroes will take. Muhammad went into the cave 20 years, if not longer. Jesus left. Moses left. The Buddha left. Gilgamesh left. And what all these people have in common is they leave life. They divorce it completely. And it's an awful place to be. How could you walk away from life that has all the stuff to give you? Attractive people, things to see, places to go, things to explore and experience. Are you telling me that there is nothing that life can offer you? And for someone like the Buddha, yes, it has nothing to offer me. Now, a place down here can give you a lot of maps. You know, you don't like Pete's, go to Phil's. You don't like Phil's, go to Cole's. But once everything down here is removed, you're in complete darkness, psychologically, emotionally speaking. Because these are our guiding lights. You don't like me? Well, take a different class. You don't like this companion? Well, take a different companion. You don't like this particular smoking? Well, take a different smoking. But when all of the stuff has vanished, what are you going to do? You're a physical human being, but your physical body can't connect to anything down here. It's like you're in a relationship, you've been with this person for about 10 years. Sex, you want to throw up. Conversation, you want to throw up. Every inch of the house you occupy, you want to throw up. Is it possible that you live in a 10-bedroom with this person with 20 years of history, and there is nothing in this history that you can hang on to save the relationship? And the answer is no. And so you divorce. Now, if you divorce on a physical level, you can find another companion, you can find another class, you can find another car. But when nothing touches you emotionally, when everything is devalued for you intellectually and psychologically, there is no place to go. Life has absolutely nothing to offer you. And if you've read the Gospel of Judas, beautiful book, or if you have read the biography of Malcolm or watched the movie, if you know anything about the life of Moses, what happens to them is they, in fact, lose interest in talking to people altogether, to the point that Jesus looks at Judas and says, you know what? I just want to die. Life, physical, emotional, spiritual, not worth living. But you're talking about a very mature stage of being, where you have gone out there, you have talked, you have spoken to people, only to realize, no, you can't make the grass grow by pulling it. Eventually, people have to come to their own understanding gradually, but they need to be interested. And I'm tired of inspiring people. It doesn't work. So when you ask, why someone like Gilgamesh is created, the Buddha is created, they find nothing interesting down here. And when they don't find anything interesting, all these people have a narrative they can go back to. Now, the narrative for someone like Moses is that the mountains, because we are talking about Egypt, Egypt is a flat land, and you create pyramids for one reason. Because these ancient people always believed that in the mountains live God. And since you're in a flat land, well, you need to create mountains. What do? You create mountains. Okay. And in the desert life, at night, in solitary, there is what God, you can find some spiritual Christ or truth. So all these people have a narrative they can go back to. The Buddha goes back to Hinduism, eventually becomes disappointed. And what you have in all of these figures is that there comes a point where they just sit. They're no longer a Hindu or a Jew or a Christian or this. They sit in complete darkness. And if there is anything called grace actually exists, okay, either something comes down and they have an understanding, or nothing comes down, nothing opens up, there is no breakthrough. They only realize that life down here is not as interesting as people make it to be. And that's how usually cults are created. There are people who like this. Eventually they grow tired of it. They're looking for something else. They realize there's a cult outside of life. It doesn't talk about sex. It doesn't talk about education the way we do. It doesn't talk about relationships the way we do. It has its own different definitions for everything. Its fun is different. Its pleasure is different. Its goal is different. And so up here there is a teacher, and there are students, and then from this teacher you have a set of teachings. And teachings you can't find down here, and it's not in books. In cult, there is always oral transmission. Someone speaks, you listen, you don't listen, you hear. And then you're inspired. And then after many months or weeks or years, and it's mostly years, when you hear something, you begin to listen. And you listen for one reason only. The teachers usually create buttons inside you, and it takes a long time, okay? And then you get to a place where you're able to listen, but you only listen to keywords. And those keywords have to do with your position in life, with your temperament and your personality. Some temperaments only desire to feel, not understand, only feel. So when facts and figures are given, data is given, those people just shut down. Some people don't like to feel too much. They like to understand how things come about. They're in the business of understanding, not feeling. Okay? So, and then as the teacher talks, you hear, then you listen. Out of the 20 things that you listen, the keywords, you only focus on one or two. And that's how you spend the rest of your days, just trying to figure out those two keywords as they make sense to you. The problem with this particular definition of a code and a teacher-student relationship is that whatever connection you have to the three branches of life here, they're completely gone. You have no father. You have no mother. You have no friends. You're no longer interested in the language of the iron or the bronze or the silver. And so you just need to be like a Superman to be able to kind of find something like that and then endure it, because it is quite tormenting. And some people don't find anything. Anyone else? Yeah.
But do you think people can be like
I think some people temperamentally are wired, they're born to be relatively satisfied. Now, it doesn't mean that once in a while there are no cracks, because once in a while they do suffer cracks and they begin to examine and find everything to be somewhat meaningless, but they recover very, very quickly. We have a neighbor, his name is Bob, about 80, his wife Betsy, 80. Very content. They're always positive, always. Now, the truth is, if temperamentally you're wired to be dark and gloomy, you can read positive books. It doesn't work for you. That's not the way you're wired. That's not part of your software or hardware. Some people, yes, can exercise more contentment than others. And it's mostly temperamental. Or it could also be like the example we gave last night about me having cancer, stage 4. The moment you accept, you're content. You're not going to change anything because you don't have the power to change, so you accept. Anyone? Before we move on? Wolf?
So like in terms of like the ages of and that were some of them younger, right?
Yeah. You don't want to be around young teachers. Young teachers are no good. Young teachers are like hippies. Young teachers are like young loves. They are filled with inspiration and hope. They're not seasoned the right way. A good teacher is like Moses. It's like Muhammad. It's like Confucius. Because what they understand is about 99.9% of the people are just regular people. They just want to survive life. They want food, they want shelter, they want clothing, they want to take care of their parents and their kids. They want their kids to go to a good school. The kingdom of God within, who cares about that, man? I got kids, I got parents. And so they realize that since most people have difficulty surviving physical life, and physical life is enormously complicated, they need solutions to physical stuff. I mean, I'm not Jesus Christ, who can easily walk away from Mary and Joseph. I'm not like Moses, who can walk away from the only woman I've ever loved. I'm just a regular chap, you know. I can't turn my back to my job, to my kids, to my wife. I'm not like that. I live in life, and life is complicated, and I need solutions to that. And Moses understands that. And if you look at the last 6 commandments, not the first 4, the first 4 are just junk. You know, only worship Yahweh. Are you kidding? Keep Sabbath holy. What Sabbath? This is America. You know, you shouldn't worship any graven images. Really? I can't worship anything? But the last 6, profound. Take care of your parents. Don't steal. You know, because when you steal, if you get caught, you lose your reputation. Don't cheat. Don't lie. Just be mature about life. The same thing in Muhammad. I'm not going to turn the other cheek. My people are dying left and right. I'm going to pick up the sword and kill you. An eye for an eye. Physical life is tough and it demands justice. The truth is, Jesus is just a young hippie. His ideas are great, they're just not practical. What, you want me to keep turning the left to right until what? You eventually catch yourself and stop hitting me? By then I'll be dead. And not everybody enjoys the kingdom of God within. I enjoy the kingdom of God without. I like going on hikes. I like spending time with my parents and my friends. I like drinking and smoking and watching good movies. Nothing wrong with that. Why do you have to mess it up for me? Always hang out with people who are older, like much older. Not 30, not 40, not 50, not 60, like they're close to death. Huh? What? Because they're seasoned. A young teacher just says, go out there and just love. It's an experience. Have fun with it. A seasoned teacher says, love is great, but man, if you choose the wrong person to love, you'll need therapy for the next 30 years. Is it worth it? The answer is no. Yeah. Kylie. What? I think every one of those people have something to offer to their people in society, But there are a couple of things. There are certain people who are basically teachers on the stage. I can stand here and talk about love and all of its shades for the next 5 hours. This is a stage. But there are certain teachers who are not so much about the abstract concepts. They say, Kylie, why don't you come to my house? And they bring that concept from up here down here. And they work with you one-on-one. Now, the practical aspect is always going to be tough. It's always going to be messy. What you and I usually like is, I have about $1 million. I want to go out and buy a house that's been made. The other path is go to Home Depot, buy all the stuff you need to build a house and build it yourself. Some people are down here, very practical, very hands-on. Hands-on is always messy. Always. Malcolm X and Martin Luther, they're about mass movements. They're about mass inspiration. It's tough, but what's more difficult is, see, inspiration, I've been in about maybe 4 or 5, one huge revolution, and maybe 3 or 4 mass movements. And what they all have in common is the following. You're walking the streets, and life is frustrating, and life is tough, and life makes you angry, life is frustrating. And all of a sudden there is someone out there who has a great amount of magnetism, great amount of charisma, and comes and says, you need to fight for justice. And 50 people are walking, and you just jump in. You're inspired. Now, it doesn't mean I'm a political scientist. It doesn't mean I'm a sociologist. It doesn't mean I'm a philosopher. All I know is that this movement has inspired me. And now I'm swallowed by the inspiration. Intense feelings. And the moment inspiration comes about, your intellect shuts down. You don't think. You just move. And I remember one time when this truck stopped and all these soldiers and machine guns came out, I would say, whisper to myself, you can kill me. It's okay. I don't mind getting shot. Now, I was a 15-year-old punk. I don't mind getting shot. Why? Because there are tens of thousands of people in the streets shouting for the same thing. But if someone was to say, okay, you want justice, I will slap you. And then now you tell me why I slapped you. Give me the reasons. Tell me how well you understand things. Now that's a very, very difficult place to be. Transformation or change, if for example, you want to move from here to here, I have to work really, really hard to change the definition of pleasure and fun that lives inside you because of all the addictions you have down here. You've created lots of habits. You call your friends every single day. You smoke with them. My job is to have you divorced from this and come to this. Instead of smoking, now you need to read books. Well, reading books is tough. Understanding what the books are saying is tough. Writing essays about what you've read is tough. You need a different set of tools. And what's going to happen is if your mom keeps telling you read books, as a kid who is addicted to the pleasures down here, the only thing you can do is abuse your mom. You don't understand the concerns of your mom. Your mom sees in you potential, talent, but the only thing you see is smoking. She sits there, weeps and cries, and all you want to do is go back to smoking. You have no idea what she wants and why she wants the things she wants. Okay? You say yes, but you do the opposite. She has to sacrifice. She's like a mini Jesus Christ. She comes down and she tries again and again and again and again. And lo and behold, after 10 years of trying, you get it. But it took 10 years. So yes. I don't even know your question.
So would you consider documents?
Yes, they are.
Okay, but this are, I guess, can you consider that they were also here?
As I said, they were in the business of inspiring the masses. You're not there to educate the masses. You're there to inspire the masses so you can have a movement. A single human being is a single fish. But you have 10,000 people, now you have a whale. See, Malcolm X could not educate his own people. Neither was Jesus able to. Neither was Muhammad able to. The moment Muhammad died, Islam fractured into two branches. I mean, just think for a moment. You've been prophesizing for about 22 years or so, and you have all these followers, and then you die, and all of a sudden there is a fight. You read the Gospel of Mark. He says, what are you guys going to do when I die? And there's a fight amongst the disciples. Well, I'm going to take over, one says. The other says, no, you're not qualified. I will take over. That's just the way things are. Giving tools of understanding is enormously difficult, if not altogether impossible. Anyone else before we... What time is it? Okay. Maybe we can start the Epic of Gilgamesh. Writing was created in Egypt some 3,000, 4,000, or 5,000 years ago. They get some mud. They put some script on it, some lines. They put in the sun to dry. And now you have writing. And of course it evolves over time. But before that, cultures were oral. Someone speaks and the rest listen. The Epic of Gilgamesh, I think it's about 5 or 6 or 7 or 10,000 years old. And one of the things about oral culture is the following. Imagine that this class is divided into 5 or 6 or 7 parts. Each part is a city or a town. And it's like playing telephone, you know. Now remember, every town has its own culture, has its own religion, has its own politics, has its own perspectives about life. So I say something, she takes what I say, the stuff that she's interested in, and she adds her own culture. Then someone from that city goes to this city. And those people tell that story to these people. They take the story, but they add a few more to it. And by the time it gets over there, it's a story that didn't exist when I first told it. This is important for you to know because the Old Testament is about 39 books that took over 1,000 years to be put together. We don't even know who wrote them. The New Testament, 27 books. It took about 400 years to come together. 15 of the 27 books almost were written by a guy who never saw Jesus. These are oral cultures, people who simply hear a story and they tell the story. Now, the thing you need to understand about oral cultures and oral transmission is the following. Not just anyone can stand on a stage and tell a story. It doesn't work that way. It's not like today where people can go to school, get a PhD or a master's degree, walk into the classroom and talk. The community chose, and sometimes those people just emerged. They had charisma, they had magnetism, they were able to inspire. And when they spoke, when they told stories, it disconnected the human being from their flesh and from all the fleshy concerns. And it was like Harry Potter. They began to daydream. Their mind could take them to places that their feet couldn't. So language had power and magic in it. Now there is a reason why it's called the Epic of Gilgamesh. All of us in this class have lives filled with a good amount of joy and a good amount of pain. And when you tell the stories, they are personal. They are your stories. Epics have to do with human condition. Epics have to do with someone who doesn't care for their emotions anymore. They have this deep understanding of life. And that means the following. If you are sad, if you are depressed, if you have loved, if you have lost, whatever it is that you have suffered from, you can find in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Why? Because the epics have to do with the human condition. Whatever you go through, the epic has it. And the epic is about a prophet, it's about a sage, it's about a philosopher who has divorced life, walked into the desert, found wisdom, and then gave it to the rest of us in a story form. Do you have any questions? Sophie? Yeah.
So you said, has he experienced epics? So like tragedies, personal tragedies in his life? By the epics?
Personal tragedies, but they're no longer personal. Maybe I can give it to you in this way, and please do not be offended. there is a very unique camaraderie that exists amongst African Americans. And it's the pain and it's the history that binds them and connects them together. It's something that Caucasians don't have. It's something that immigrants have. It's something that people who have suffered a good amount of pain have. Alcoholics have it when they join a group. Mothers who have lost their kids have it. Wives who have been widowed have it. They speak the same language. They have the same emotions. They understand suffering. They understand pain. They understand love. They also understand betrayal. And all of a sudden you realize, well, it's just no longer about that particular person. Anyone who fits that particular category understands. That's what Epic stood. It's about one man who understands what everyone is going through. Everyone. Malcolm X does not need to understand every single black person. He just knows the black history well and what it does to people. And eventually he became an epical sage. Epical in the sense that it doesn't really matter your skin color, what it is. If you're a human being, you will suffer. And if you want to overcome suffering, you come together. You eat together. You break bread together. Whether it's physical bread, emotional bread, intellectual bread, spiritual bread, it doesn't really matter. But to survive, you need to form a community. That is what an epic is. That you can't survive life being an individual. It doesn't work. Now, eventually children become like their parents. You are who your parents are. You may try to run away from it, but eventually it'll catch up to you. You are made in their image. Unless there is this miraculous thing that happens in your life and you're transformed. That's a different story. But at the end of the day, even if Jesus Christ was to walk into your life, your platform, your foundation, your dough are your parents. Okay. Not everyone can be a sage, not everyone can be a philosopher, not everyone can have a healthy life. It doesn't work that way. If your parents have been broken, there's a good chance that you'll be broken. And all you can do is just be mindful, be aware, and every time the brokenness is leaking out, you try to tap into it and control it. And I say this for the following reason. Gilgamesh has a mom and a dad, but they're very, very strange people. His mother lives in paradise. She's a goddess. If, as a father, you work really hard to save money, when your son comes home and says, Dad, I just sold ABCD and here is $1,000, your father likes the money, but he knows that if you want to have value for money, it's blood and sweat. He wants you to work for your money. Ninsun is a goddess who wants Gilgamesh to live through the kingdom of gold. She wants him to live like a god. His father is a librarian. He likes to read books. He likes to think. So Gilgamesh is cursed by having two very, very, very inspired and educated parents. And eventually Gilgamesh is going to be like them. For those of you in this class who know the story in the Old Testament, Jonah, who's told to go somewhere, and he says no, and eventually ends up in the belly of a whale. And then he has to kind of be schooled a little bit, and then he looks at God and says, okay, I will do your will. that all of us have no choice but to disobey those who are seasoned, those who want good things for us. And we'll eventually find ourselves in this dark space, and then we come to realize the wisdom of our parents or the gods or whatever, and we retreat and we go back. Okay? Now, because Gilgamesh, his parents are such interesting people, when this woman, this goddess, gets pregnant by this mortal man down here, they know that they can't name their own kid. So they take this newborn to a priestess and they say, look inside his eyes, find his soul, and tell us what to name him. It's not like today where a guy is drunk and a gal is high, they have sex, she gets pregnant, and so they look at the phone book. The gal looks at page 225, the guy looks at page 500, and they look at line 5 and line 6 and say, okay, let's call her Jubilee. It doesn't work that way. Not for Gilgamesh, at least. So for those of you in this class who may one day get married, and you may have a beautiful intellectual and emotional life, and you realize that you owe your kids the best life that they could possibly have, and you have to build their foundation, you're not just going to give them any name. You say, I want to give him a name that burdens him. That's like a cross that he has to carry. He'll forget, but one day he'll look himself in the mirror and he says, my name is Matthew, or my name is John, or my name is Malcolm. Shame will come over him. Maybe he'll repent and he'll rise up to be the name that was given to him. The name Gilgamesh means an old man who wants to become young. Go back to what I put on the board about desires, how attraction makes all of us young. Even if you're 95, the moment you become attracted to something, you have all of a sudden this life about you. Al Pacino is coming out with a brand new movie. It's going to come out in about 2 weeks or so. For those of you who like the Rambo movies, Sylvester Stallone is coming out with this new Rambo. Imagine if the movie was out. And I love the movies. And I'm going to go home, make sure everybody's asleep, turn on the TV. I'm just going to sit and be glued to my TV. Forget everything. I'll be a character while sitting on the sofa in the movie. And my body will jerk automatically. I will be fully alive. Why do things get old? And at what stage do you desire to become young? You sit in this class, maybe the first hour you were okay, hour and a half, you say, okay man, now I've seen this guy enough and I've heard enough of him. I really want to go home. Boredom has set in, frustration, and as I continue, you become more and more angry. And then you close your eyes, and maybe your eyes are open, and you think about Zachary's deep dish. You want to go pick it up, take it home. And just the imagination, the narrative, that you're going to pick up this large deep dish pizza with Caesar salad and a big bucket of Coke or water or beer. Now that is going to make you young. It's going to give you hope, dreams. And you'll keep looking at the clock. It's frustrating. But man, when the class is over, you're going to zoom to Zachary's and grab that pizza and be happy. Gilgamesh is cursed from the moment that he was born, because his parents know that life will get him old.
It doesn't matter what you desire. Eventually you will be satisfied. And every time you're satisfied with anything, you will grow old. You will become tired and frustrated and angry. And you will regret. And you will repent. But you will make the same mistake over and over and over and over again. "10,000 years ago, the story was created. And it speaks to us today in volumes. We are told that Gilgamesh was given a heart that knew no rest. Philly and I have some age on us. We're always moving. We're always chasing. There is no rest for us. It may not be sex or drugs. It may not be movies, but healthcare. Finding something that's meaningful, that will speak to us at our age, the stage we occupy in life. And Gilgamesh does not want rest when he dies. He wants to rest while he's alive. He wants contentment. Now, there is another thing to Gilgamesh that's interesting. He is 2/3 God and 1/3 human. That 75% of him is Jesus Christ. 25% is just a regular chap. Now, you may think and assume that the 2/3 will overpower the 1/3 human. That's not the case. The flesh overtakes everything that's divine inside him. And that's a lesson for all of us. You may want to reach perfection, beauty, contentment. But if there is a part in you that's human, it will come up. And it will destroy the spiritual house that you've created. Even Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, "Let this cup pass by me." That's the human part that comes about. Even on the cross, he loses his faith. He becomes human. He feels abandoned. "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani." My God, why have thou forsaken me? And these are great lessons. When you become human, you will make mistakes. You will fall. You will fail. You will have regrets. You will have remorse. You will be angry. And that's just the way things are. But there are moments where the inspiration will seep through. You will become a poet. You will become a musician. But as long as there are moments of humanity about us, we will always go astray. We will always contaminate and corrupt. Now, what does it mean to be 2/3 God? It means that when you speak, you can inspire, but you don't know why you inspire. That physically, you're profoundly attractive. Whenever you walk, women just follow you. Men follow you. And God is strong, so is Gilgamesh. He's like Samson. He has all these divine qualities about him, but because of 1/3 being human, he has the 7 deadly sins. He has greed, he has lust, he has envy, he has anger, he has sloth. And by sloth, I don't mean just sitting and watching TV. You don't want to think too deeply about things. And when there is trouble in your life, you're far too lazy to study and put the emotions into language to make your companion really understand what the hell you're going through. Now, what happens when you have power, but you don't know how to use your power? It's a funny thing about feminism and about women. I know you guys are saying, oh, here he goes again. You know, that women can dress however way they want, but it's the man's responsibility to know what to do. Really? You're talking about a human being who is 1/3 human, who is corrupt in so many different ways. There is nothing divine or intellectual or mature about the man that passes you by. You're expecting a bit too much from a 2-year-old. You can't give money, a lot of money to a 18-year-old. He's dumb. What the hell do you think he's going to do with all this money? Power, whether it's physical, emotional, psychological, intellectual, if it's not matured, if it's not studied, if it hasn't been tempered, it's bound to contaminate and corrupt. When you talk about cults, when you talk about teachers in these cults, what you have is people who've been inspired, but they're also enormously uneducated. They have power. They have power to inspire people, gather people around them. But what they do with their power is to exploit and to take advantage. So remember, all of us in this class have a good amount of power in a variety of different ways. And you're not going to use your power in the right way. We're not Spider-Man. With power comes responsibility. We're not there yet. We haven't even begun the story, and yet you can talk about this stuff for the next 5 weeks. Trump has power, yes. He just doesn't know how to use it to benefit people, perhaps. Even David, for those of you who've read the Old Testament, David loves a woman, but the woman is married. David is a prophet. He's been spoken to by the gods. He's a king. But he knows he just can't have this woman because she's married, so you know what he does? He sends her husband to the front lines. He gets killed. Now she's widowed. Now he can have her. And then the prophet Nathan comes in and reprimands him. So just because you're a prophet, it doesn't mean that you know how to use your power well. You need to grow a great amount of appreciation for someone like Malcolm X, who was given this enormous amount of power, and yet he kept himself from becoming completely intoxicated. He walked away. This is not an ordinary human being. Socrates was given the power of life. He said, no, life is not worth living. He chose death over it. So what does one do when they have a lot of power, untamed, uneducated? Well, they abuse people, and that's what Gilgamesh did. But there is another thing that happens when you have a lot of power. It creates a good amount of privilege. It also does create a good amount of boredom. And what's the best way to get rid of boredom? Abuse people, exploit people, take advantage of things. Trash everything that comes your way. Time is it? I'm tired. You have any questions? Yeah.
Still distracted by this.
It's the fire alarm. Slaney, it happens every day. Yeah.
So far,
he has relatability more than the human side and his godly side, basically,
Right.
so far. So does that mean at a certain extent, like, okay, you're saying that basically he has more relatability to us than his godly side? Is that like an excuse for why he has more relatability to, I guess, the humanness or the human side of us, I guess? Because I'm just all like, you're saying he's part God, I'm just all like, where's the relatability at a certain extent? Still part God.
Can you say that again?
So you're saying that he's 2/3 God. And I guess I'm trying to find relatability or a connection with Gilgamesh.
Like what makes him so divine?
Well, part God, right? So that's what sort of connects him to the divine.
He is part God, but he has forgotten.
So yeah, what you were explaining.
It's kind of like, forgive me again for this analogy. Imagine that you and I move into a relationship and it blossoms into this thing called love. Right? And in love there is submission. One becomes passive, the other becomes active. You submit, you sacrifice. Then the politics of life gets in. Then my personality, my temperament, my selfhood comes in, i.e. my ego comes in. I'm no longer going to be as passive. Down here, it doesn't matter how divine you are. Eventually, the politics of life, the politics of being a human, is going to contaminate any inspiration you may have. And it takes a while for Gilgamesh to become fully 2/3 and then get rid of the 1/3 human. But that's at the end of the story. And he has to be tested and examined plenty of times. And that's one of the things that you will learn in the story, is that good teachers are not just going to give you wisdom. Good teachers are not just going to give you understanding. Good teachers are not going to just give you their time and energy. They will test you. They're not charitable people. Good teachers. Anyone else? Yeah. Probably not. Your assignment is, I think it's published, no? For this week? Yeah. Oh, I'll publish it tonight. Don't worry, you're not missing anything. Yeah.
You have a research that you want to see, or you have a research you want to support that. I don't know.
Help you with what?
Help support whatever our research we do.
No, your next assignment is very much like the previous assignment. You listen to some audio and you just, right. If I was to give you a different response, I would say, depending on the sort of student that you are, you shouldn't read anything. You should just listen. You shouldn't read anything. You should just listen. But then the question is, to whom? And I wouldn't know that. See, your foundation is set. Maybe you're a Christian. So whatever you read, you're going to season it with Christian philosophy. But that's your interpretation of Christianity. And so you're going to contaminate everything you read with your own ideas, your past, your history, your biases, prejudices. And as long as you keep doing that, you're not learning anything new. You're just supporting and reinforcing the old. You know, it's like if you've had a traumatic childhood, the only people you go out with are broken people, you know. And so what happens is you keep reinforcing the trauma. It doesn't mean that you love it. You want to move on. You want someone healthy and decent so you can have a stable relationship. But it's not something that was modeled to you. It's not something that you know. You don't have the tools for it. So you keep repeating the same thing. And so when you say, I want to read something, well, if you don't know how to think well, You're going to mess up even the things that have been written in a very precise, clear way. You will mess it up. If I am an unhealthy human being and you are healthy, if you and I begin to have a relationship, you and I will mess you up. Every time you go home after you come home after a while, you'll be angry because you don't know what to do with it. You just go out with someone who's has had some difficulties in life. Just go out with an alcoholic. Go out with someone whose addiction is not very positive. And let's just say you have no addictions of any kind. Or maybe you have addictions to good things. Let's say like reading books, listening to audiobooks. There comes a point where you just don't have the capacity to listen to anything anymore. You've been abused too much in this relationship. We don't do well with healthy people because they demand too much from us. So you can read whatever. Yeah, Philip?
I was going to ask the story of Gilgamesh. Is it a book form or is it an essay that makes it
If you email me, I'll send you a link to a YouTube version. It's read by someone who has a beautiful voice, and he tells the story in such a nice way. Yeah, just remind me, because I will forget. Anyone else? You sure? Yeah. Supposedly Gilgamesh. But the story is very much like the Gospels, that it was moving around from one country to another, and it keeps getting longer and longer and longer. Late 20th century, there were only, I think, 19 tablets. And then 6 more tablets were discovered. And as time goes on, more and more things are discovered, and the story becomes a bit more complicated. And sometimes it doesn't even make sense, and it becomes disjointed. From nowhere, all of a sudden, you have scorpion men. And then a few centuries later, there is this brand new story about scorpion men that come from a different community. It's kind of like when you read the Genesis story, there are 2, sometimes if you pay close attention, 3 different creation stories. Or if you read the genealogy in the Gospel of, say, Matthew and Luke, in one genealogy, Jesus is traced back to Abraham. In another, he's traced back to Adam. So, different people do different things with stories. But yeah, you shouldn't be worried about those things. I think you should just read the story, the parts that interest you, just grab them, study them, internalize them, apply them, and see where it'll end up. Yeah. Someone had their hand up. No? Gilgamesh had abused his people so much so that they can no longer endure his abuse. So they begin to pray. They begin to pray to the gods. I can walk the lake, and there is a church at the very end of it. My belly is full. I'm comfortable, content. I like who I am. I go to the church. It's got some nice stuff. It has a beautiful cross that I've always wanted to steal. Maybe I'll just sit there and try to find a way to take the cross home. And I will probably be moved to pray a little bit, but there is no pain in me. Sometimes when you pray, it's just a habit, just an addiction you have, and you speak of it. But there is no reflection in what you say. There is no heart in what you say. There is no spirit in what you say. You just pray because it makes you feel good, and there's nothing wrong with that. There are times where you feel abused emotionally. And by emotionally, I mean the following. Your physical life, your physical body, your ears, your nose, your eyes, your taste buds, your fingers, something touches you on a very physical level. And whatever touches you on the physical level creates emotions. If you're driving home and you see someone being abused, your physical eyes will create a set of very troubling emotions. Those emotions can be profoundly painful. You take those emotions to the church and you pray and you say, God, why are people so mean? Can you send down a Messiah? It's very different from my prayer. I pray from a place of privilege. You have suffered an emotional pain. Some people fall in love with Malcolm X. They read his autobiography, and there are pages they just don't get. They can't sleep, they can't eat. They take that torment to the church, and they pray. Why was Malcolm this way? What exactly did he mean? Help me understand. Some people have divorced the physical, the emotional, psychological, intellectual altogether. They have walked into the desert. Isolation, loneliness, depression. They take that to the church. So what you have is 3 or 4 or 5 different kinds of prayers. The prayer of the mouth or the tongue with no emotions, no reflection. A prayer of the emotion that's caused by the physical life. The prayer of the intellect. You want understanding. Then there is the prayer of the heart or the spirit. And then there is this other prayer, the last one. And that particular prayer is a prayer of silence. You don't say anything. You're just broken. And you are resting in brokenness. And you're being seasoned in brokenness. And there is enough faith and trust inside you that says, I don't need to express anything. If there is a God out there, he or she or they know what lives inside me. And if I'm worthy, they will come down and help me. So remember, you have a community of people walking into this temple, this sacred space, and they pray to the gods. They say to the gods, you gave us a shepherd, a king, Gilgamesh. He's supposed to take care of us. The only thing we see him do is abuse us, harass us. You gave us this king. Bring someone to cleanse him, baptize him. And what you find in the epic is the following. If you ever make any prayers that come with a good amount of pain, and those pains are sincere, the gods will listen. The gods will hear, and they will do what is good for you, or what they deem that's good for you. Now, for us secular-minded people in the 21st century, the story is fantastic. It's like Harry Potter. Really, gods? There are gods? And really, they listen to our prayers? Those people believed so. We don't have to believe. And so the gods up there in paradise come together and they have a discourse. They look at the mother Ninsun and they say to her, you made Gilgamesh. And despite being 2/3 God and 1/3 human, the 1/3 has overpowered him. He's drunk with just being human. He's drunk with the 7 deadly sins. create his equal. And that's what Ninsan does. She cries. She takes this mud, forms it in a man, and throws it down. And you have his equal, whose name is Enkidu. And Enkidu means the most innocent of mankind. He has not been touched by human civilization. He hasn't been touched by human thinking. He hasn't been touched by human society. He is innocent. Enkidu. E-N-K-I-D-O. Maybe. What time is it? Forgive me for asking repeatedly.
8:21.
Okay, we'll do 10 more minutes and then we'll go home. Do you have any questions? Can there be a question? It's more like a monologue and it's tiring me out.
I was thinking it's equal when he's not innocent.
When you have a lot of power in life, you can use and abuse. When you're like Brad Pitt, you can get married, you can divorce, you can have 25 girlfriends all at the same time. Yeah, power. With power comes attachment. You don't really care. And that's one of the problems with privilege. You just don't care. You can care. Because to care means to spend time, to get to know, to understand, to form intimacy. And for someone who has power and privilege, I don't know if you like soccer. I wanted to be a soccer pro. It didn't work out too well, but some of these players who are given millions of dollars, they buy these cars that are worth millions, and then they just bang it to the wall. And then the police comes, asks them what happened, says, I just wanted to know if it survives a crash. And it doesn't. And that's what happens. When you have too much of anything, eventually you lose interest. You have no equal unless you fall victim emotionally to someone who has more magnetism than you do, more privilege than you do. And the thing about us, as I said before, the moment you find anything attractive, you gravitate towards it. If the attraction is very, very intense, you spend time with that thing. And time creates stories. Stories are the glue to the relationship. And then you become intimate. I'm not talking about physical intimacy. You just become intimate. And in intimate, you form attachment. And in attachment, something interesting happens. When you fall in love, your personality goes away and you inherit other person's desire. You become all him and no you. That's what happens to Gilgamesh. But for that to happen, we need to kind of talk about love a little bit, and we need to put some steps on the board, because it's not the sort of romantic love that you and I usually think about. It's a love that it's quite difficult and tormenting, needs a good amount of education, lots of suffering and pain in it. Anyways, listen, so you guys look tired. I'm tired. You need to go home. I need to go home and watch Rambo. Yeah, I got nothing else going on for me, man. Just the reruns. The one that took place in Burma, yeah, that was a good one. Yeah. Which one? Oh, the last one. That was okay. He's just getting old. He looks bad.
That's what he did. The post is that up. That's the power by age.
That's true. Yeah. Well, he's what, 90 now?